So today we're going to learn about line plots. And line plots is a new kind of graph that we can use to show data. A lot of times when we use line plots, it's just with information that has numbers is usually where you see it because it uses a number line. And it also is often used when we're talking about something with fractions or something we're measuring. And so you can see that it's a good way to express data that is that kind of information. So when you're talking about a line plot, the first thing you need is a data chart or a table that gives you information to graph. This is usually just a list of numbers. So if you see my list, it says size of leaves found in my backyard in inches. And you'll notice I have things like 5.5, 4 1/4. It means that I'm taking a ruler and I'm measuring the leaves with my ruler. And I'm doing it to the nearest 1/4 inch. And so I've got all this data, right? That I've collected by measuring all of my leaves. And then I make a line and label it from the least amount to the greatest amount. This will look like a fraction number line. So you guys have all made fraction number lines in the past. It looks a lot like that, except for I'm starting at the smallest whole that I have, or see, because my smallest whole, if you had noticed from before, is 4 1/4. But I want to start at a whole number. So I'm starting at 4. And it's going all the way up to my next whole number, which is 7. Because if you go back, you'll see, oh, my largest length is 6.5 inches. I know that my line needs to start at 4 and go to 7. And then I need to put in all the fractions that are in between it. I have 4 1/4, and then I have 4.5. It really is the same as 4 2/4. So if I think of it that way, 4.5 is the exact same as 4 2/4. But when I'm using a ruler, it usually shows me where the half is. Doesn't say 4 2/4 because 1/2 is equal to 2/4, which I can think about if I remember that if I have 2 rectangles and I divide this one in half, I divide this one in fourths, 1/2 is equal to 2/4. So that's all I'm doing is each time we have 1/2, you can also think of it as 2/4 when you're labeling your number line, but you want to make sure you write it as a half. So I've got then 4 3/4, 5, 5 1/4, 5.5, 5 3/4, 6, 6 1/4, 6.5, 6 3/4, and 7. So I have all of my numbers that it could be going from 4 to 7 if I'm counting by 1/4, because that's what my ruler is. And then what I do is I count how many of each length I have from my table, and I put an X for each one in my line. So let me show you this. If I'm looking for 4 1/4, so I'm going to get a different color. Let's do that. And I want to see, I've got 1 4 1/4. I've got 2 4 1/4, and I have 3 4 1/4. So I know that I need 1, 2, 3 X's. And that shows me that I had 3 leaves that were 4 1/4 inches. And I keep doing that for all of my lengths. So I go back and I say, oh, let me find 4.5. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so let's make sure I have 5. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's all I do. I just keep going back and seeing my data points and what my different numbers are and putting that many X's for as many as I had. And then the last part is I need to make sure I have a title for my line plot and a label for my line. Because otherwise, if I just have this doesn't tell me anything. I have no idea what I'm measuring, what this data is. I have no idea. But if I write the title is size of leaves in my backyard, and I know that this bottom line, these numbers represent length of leaves in inches, then I know, oh, I was looking at leaves in my backyard and I had 3 of them that were 4 1/4 inches long. I had, 4 of them that were 5 inches long, and I can answer all kinds of questions about it. But this shows me all my data really easily. It's much easier to see how many of each kind I had and the different lengths of leaves than it was when I looked at just my table. That was way too much information. But if you look at it now, it's much more organized and it helps me. Now I can find out lots of information and answer questions about my data, about the size of leaves in my backyard and the length of leaves in inches. Let's look at these questions. Question 1 is, what is the most common size of leaves in my backyard? Pause the video and then you can see. If you got that the most common size of leaves was 4 1/2 inches, then you are correct. Because if you notice, 4 1/2 has the most in it. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 5 of them. And that's more than any of the other ones. And I can just see it by looking across. How many leaves are 5 inches long? Pause and see. And the answer is 4 leaves. And I know that because I go to my 5 and I count 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4. How many leaves are shorter than 5 inches? So pause it and see. If you wrote 9 leaves, that would be correct. And some of you might say, no, it should be 13. But it's not 13 because I said shorter than 5 inches, which means I can't count 5. I've got to just count the things that are on this side, because that would be shorter. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then look at the last one. How many leaves are 6 inches or longer? So pause and see. If you said that there are 6 leaves, then you're right. And some of you might say, wait. I thought it was only 4. But remember, I said 6 inches or longer, which means that we include the 6. So it's anything from here on. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's really important to pay attention to what the questions are asking us about our line plot and the different information we can give. So now let's make a line plot together. These are the materials you're going to need. You're going to need a ruler. If you have a ruler that looks like this is the best kind. But if you don't and you just have a regular ruler, you can still figure out where 1/4, 1/2, and 3/4 are by seeing the lines. The longest line in between the numbers is going to be the 1/2, and then the lines that are a little bit longer, but not the smallest ones, are going to be your 1/4 and then your 3/4 on the other side of it. So you need a ruler. You need either a whiteboard with a number line, blank number line that if you're in my class, you have, and a dry erase marker, or you can just use a piece of paper, make a number line on it, and a pencil. And when you make a number line, you're just going to draw a line, That's as straight as you can with an arrow on one side and an arrow on the other side. So those are those three things. And then the fourth thing is objects from home that are shorter than your ruler. And the hint is if you find objects that are closer in size, it will make your line plot much easier and more fun. You won't have to do as many numbers. So go around and maybe you want like 10 objects from home that you can measure. So pause the video and find all the materials. And then we'll get started. Okay, first thing you're going to do is measure your objects and write down each length you get. Make sure that you measure to the nearest 1/4 of an inch. So look at this. I want to make sure when I measure that I line up the one end of my object with 0, and then I want to see where does the other end go to. And I see it goes to this half right here, but it's next to the 7. So this pencil is 7.5 inches long. Then I took a marker and I lined it up at 0, and then I looked to see where it was closest to, and I said, oh, it's at this 4th, but it's after the 8, so it's 8 1/4 inches. So you want to measure all of your objects. So you can stop the video and measure all your objects until you know how long each one is. Now that you've measured all of your objects, you're going to make a table with the lengths. And this is just an easy way to organize all of your information. I found another object that was 7 1/4 inches. I had another object that was 8 inches. And I'm just going to keep going in and filling in my data. So here is my data. I measured 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 objects. And those are the lengths I got. Okay, so now you should have your information written down too. If you haven't, pause and make your table. You can use your piece of paper, or you can do it on your whiteboard, just listing all of the lengths you had. Now we're on step 3, which is find the length that is the least and the length that is the greatest. And those numbers are going to go on the ends of your number line. So I'm going to put a line here, and I'm going to put a line here. And these are going to be my shortest length and my longest length. But I want the whole number that comes after it. So if I see 7 is my smallest, so I'm going to write 7. And then I see that I have, as my longest, I have 8 3/4. But I don't want to go with 8 3/4. I want to go to the nearest whole. So I'm going to go to 9. And then I want to put the fractions in between it. Now remember, I want to make sure that I'm counting by fourths. So when I make it, I'm going to say, okay, so if I think of halfway in between my line is going to be my 8, then I need 3 lines in between my 7 and my 8 because I need 4 pieces. And I need 3 lines in between my 8 and my 9 because I need 4 pieces. So now I'm going to label it. I'm going to label this as 7 1/4. And this one I'm going to label as 7 1/2. I can put 7 2/4 under it to help me remember that those are the same. And I'm going to write 7 3/4, and then 8 1/4, 8 1/2, which is the same as 8 2/4, 8 3/4. And that is my number line. Now I've made mine. Go and make yours, just like I did. Now we're on to step 4, which is to put an X on your number line for every length in your table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my table and I'm going to say, oh, the first one's 7 1/2. So I'm going to put an X on 7.5. And you know what? I'm going to pick another color. That way it stands out. So I put an X on 7.5. And I like to check off the ones I've done. That way I remember. Now I'm going to do 8 1/4. Okay, I go to my thing. I put an X on 8 1/4. Okay, I've done that one. Now I'm going to do 7 1/4. Okay, I put an X here. And I want to try and make sure that they're kind of lined up as best I can. Now I'm going to do an 8. And I just keep going through all of my numbers and putting X's for each one on my line plot, the video, and put in the X's for yours. So now I've finished putting in my X's for my line plot. Now let's do the next step. Make sure that you've put in all your X's for your line plot as well. So now that you have all of your X's on your line plot, it's time for step 5, which is to give your line plot a title and label your line. So I need to label my line, which is going to be length in inches, because that's what this is showing me. This is telling me that I measured all these things in length and inches. So then I'm going to give my line plot a title so I know what it was that I was measuring. So I'm going to write objects in my house. And that is my line plot. I've now made a line plot that has all kinds of information in it. I know that I measured 12 things because I have 12 X's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I know that most of the things I measured were 8 inches long. I can find out all kinds of information just from my line plot. I could ask people questions about my line plot and you could answer them. Like I could ask you how many objects were less than 8 inches long, or how many objects were between 7 and 8 inches long. There are lots of questions I could ask you. So now let's see if you can do the next 2 problems on your own. So using your pencil and paper and ruler, or using your ruler and your whiteboard and your number line, go ahead and pause the video and see if you can do this. You can always leave me a comment on the answer that you get, or take a picture of your line plot and post it underneath. And then let's see if you can solve this one with the fish. So measure your fish and create a line plot from your data. Pause it and find the answer. So that's it for how to make and use a line plot to show data and to find out information from line plot. Next time, so that's it for how to make and use a line plot. One of the reasons why we did this is because it has to deal with measuring. And next time on Lessons with Miss D, we'll be talking about other kinds of measuring. So see you next time. Bye.